now part of the All Everything Entertainment Podcasting Network.
Working Fans Podcast. Cool.
Yep.
All right, here we go. Coming down 3, 2.
Welcome back for another week of the Working Fans Podcast. This is AJ. I'm the former wrestler. We've got Dave, the ultimate fan, here with us. As we do every week, our producer Joe likes to make us sound good and makes us look way more professional than we actually are. As always, you can find us on Twitter, that's @FansWorking, Facebook, Working Fans Pod. We've got email where you can reach out to us and please contact us to let us know what you think of the podcast and for any ideas that you might have. That's workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. We're on Instagram where you can keep up with us at workingfanswrestling_pod. And then you can now listen to us on all major platforms, including Anchor.fm. We're on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Apple Podcasts, and you can actually check us out on YouTube. Now, it's important when you go onto the Apple Podcasts and YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a rating, let us know what you think so you can help us out and we can continue to do what we love and bring you guys in as fans.
All right, everybody, it's the Working Fan Podcast with the man they call Dave. And today we're going to have a special subject. We're talking about two of the all-time greats, Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair. And to do that, I brought one of my all-time favorite guests, one of my favorite wrestlers from the NWA territory days, Mr. George South. Mr. Number One, how are you, sir?
Man, Dave, I'm doing great, buddy. Thank you so much. Man, if the fans knew what me and you had to rig up to get this to happen.
Hey, I'm happy you're here, George. Let's start it off. Dusty Rhodes. What can you tell me about some stories with Dusty? I know you're a big Dusty fan.
Oh, big Dusty fan. And, it's one thing, as a wrestling fan to read about these guys in a magazine and maybe to see them on TV, early in their career. But when you actually work for them, when they actually, help pay your bills, it's just a completely different respect, for Dusty. It's amazing to me now as I look back, over the years, several people have had like maybe negative things to say about Dusty and the Jim Crockett territory. But Dave, what's funny? When we were all making all that money, boy, nobody had nothing negative to say.
Yeah.
You know what? And what I was able to do is get real close to Dusty, and he knew, you know what? Dave, he always used to call me and Gary Roll his utility guys. And for years, I didn't know what that meant. But then later, he told me, he said, whatever I need to be done, y'all do it. And man, what a great compliment, coming from Dusty, that whatever he needed. And I learned so much, just being around him. And it's just amazing. I don't think I've ever met a more competitive guy. I mean, you hear stories of these wrestlers that, would take a bet to drink motor oil just because it was a $20 bet, and I know Dusty was so competitive. We did, and just recently somebody showed video of it, but we did a charity basketball game, Dave, one time where the Charlotte Police played the NWA wrestlers. And I'm talking about when Rock and Roll and Midnight, were at the top of there was no, the hottest territory in the world was Jim Crockett Promotion. And we're doing this fun game. For charity, for heaven's sake. And what was so cool? It was such a mystique day back then that, everybody hated the police because they were going up against Rock and Roll and these great-looking baby faces, Sting, Nikita. Well, when the police came onto the court, guess who came onto the court with them, Dave? The Four Horsemen.
Oh, wow.
Listen, Eddie Flair couldn't have booked this no better. So the Four Horsemen and Flair come out, and we're in the dressing room. They give us these NWA jerseys, and me and Rocky King made the team. I'm talking about Dick Murdoch, Dutch Mantell, Baron Von Raschke, all these legends. And I'm just glad to be part of the team, man. I'm thinking, you ain't getting this jersey back.
Right.
So they're introducing us, and we're getting ready to go up to the dressing room. This place, they get $5 tickets for Jim Crockett's mother. She who's passed away, but she was big into animals and rescue animals, so it was a charity thing. It sold out the Charlotte Coliseum basketball, and so they're introducing us. The music's playing. The last three people in the dressing room was me, Rocky King, and the American Dream. And I got ready to go through the curtain, and Dusty, Dave, this is a true story. Dusty reached up and grabbed my elbow, and he turned me around, and he looked me right in the face. I mean, that blonde afro and those scars on his forehead.
Yeah.
And Dave, he said, "Don't you make a fool out of me." And I said, "Stupid me, Dave." I said, "Dusty, this is for fun." And Dave, the most serious look that I've ever seen on a man is he looked at me dead in the eye, nose to nose, and he said, "Kid, they ain't nothing for fun." so I was scared to death. Oh my God! So we went out. Luckily, I really think to this day, if we would have lost, Dusty would have probably fired every one of us.
That's incredible.
But we won the game, and believe it or not, we were all heroes. But it was kind of funny because you had all these police officers that were overweight. You had all of us wrestlers that are not used to running up and down a court.
Right.
So it was kind of comical, Dave. I think the final score was like 22-24.
Yeah.
We were all blown up, but Dusty was so competitive. But you know what? My favorite time with Dusty, even though I worked for him and Jim Crockett and he was my boss, is when that short time that he went to WWF, Dave, because that's when I was up there, and Dusty was just one of the boys. I mean, he was amazing. I got real close to him up there. I mean, he would dress with us in the dressing room. I think he got the last laugh with all the polka dots, Dave, because he actually got it over.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, people loved him. And I tell you a funny story. He called me one time Sunday morning. I just got in from church like at 10 a.m. in the morning, and he called me. He said, "George, I need you at the Charlotte Coliseum." And I was so excited, Dave. I'm serious. I said, "Dusty, I'll be right there." And he said, "Oh, well, you go ahead, but I ain't getting there till 8 o'clock tonight." I forget, I was so excited. But that's how, I don't know, he was my all-time favorite. I've never seen somebody draw. You know, when you depend on each other, Dave, and I know I get excited on here, but there was no contracts. We depended on each other. No, these young wrestlers don't even understand what I'm talking about, but we depended on each other to feed each other's families.
Right.
And seriously, I mean, I'm not saying there wasn't jealousy and all this crap that's going on now, but man, I wanted everybody to do good, Dave, because if Dusty did good, then I'm going to do good.
Right. Professional jealousy is one thing, but at the end of the day, you guys all had each other's backs.
Man, we had to.
Yeah.
And honestly, when you hear the old saying, "Well, we spent more time together than our own families," man, that was true. That was true. But you know, my favorite Dusty story, real quick.
Yeah.
He came up with this idea, Dave, that they were going to save money. All right. So they were going to get rid of a lot of the underneath guys, but they were going to keep me and Gary Roll, and they were just going to order all of these mask outfits, Dave. And this was Dusty's ideal. So at every TV taping, where they used to be 15 guys, underneath guys, they would just be me and Gary in all these mask outfits.
Oh, God, that's great.
So the Crow Connection, the Gladiators, the Mexican Twin Devils, all of that was Dusty's ideal for Jim Crockett to save money. And I'll never forget this. Dusty gave us Jim Crockett's credit card.
Oh, wow.
And I was scared to death.
Sure.
I said, "Are you kidding me?" And Dusty told us to call the old K&H wrestling wear, where at that time, that's the only place you could get gear. And he said, "I want y'all to buy, 5 or 6 outfits." And I'm going to tell you, I wish I'd have listened to my partner, Gary Roll. He said, "George, I'm going to get us 10 outfits apiece." I said, "You can't." And me, Mr. Conscience, I said, "No. I'm just going to let you get 4 outfits like Dusty said." And of course, we got them. Crockett paid for all of it. And then it worked for about 2 months, Dave.
Yeah, right.
I mean, but then it was just too much. I mean, they were literally, we couldn't get changed in time. In other words, I would wrestle Ronnie Carvin first match as Gladiator, and then I'd have to run in the back and change into a different gimmick to come out for like the third match.
That's awesome.
And it was working until we just got so blown up, I said, screw it. I'll come out with one boot on and one boot off. And
That's
and
awesome.
but I still have the outfits. Believe it or not, I still have the outfits.
That's awesome. Do you
And of
have,
course, the famous Malkies, the Malkies beat us.
Right.
You remember that?
yes.
That was Dusty's big idea. So I loved it. We all made good money off of that little short angle on television.
Now, what can you tell me about any Ric Flair stories, George?
Oh, gosh. You know what? My favorite, I love Rick. You know what? I used to sit in the dressing room, Dave, and I'd watch Rick come in, and he would either go wash his hands or just walk by. And he'd just randomly walk over to guys and say, stand up. Lock up. He'd say, lock up with me.
Mm.
And they'd lock up for, good or bad, and he'd walk away. And after about 2 months of this, he would do it to me a couple times. I finally asked Ronnie Garvin, I said, what the heck is Rick doing? I said, why does he just walk in here and don't say nothing and lock up with guys and walk away? And Ronnie said, oh, you don't know? I said, heck no. He said, Rick can tell, and this is so special, Dave. He said, Rick can tell more in 2 minutes with you than if he wrestled you. In other words, what I meant is, he just locked up. He knew if you knew what you were doing in that ring by just a lockup,
Right.
Dave. So there's a lot of guys that never got to do any more than that lockup. But I knew he was Ric Flair. I was a big Ric Flair Mark II. So the first time I wrestled him, he was NWA champ. But see, on Saturday mornings, Dave, if you can remember in Atlanta, we did those tapings at like 9 a.m. in the morning.
Mm.
So Rick hated to wrestle. Now, he didn't mind doing the interviews, but he always had to catch a plane that afternoon. So he hated to wrestle, okay, and then have to shower and get cleaned up and go jump on a plane when he could just do an interview. But every now and then, Dusty, just to prove to Rick that Dusty's in charge, he would make Rick wrestle. And one time Rick was just fed up, and I'm not lying, just as simple as we're talking. He said, well, give me George South.
Wow.
And I was in the other dressing room. I didn't even know this. And when I got ready to go through the curtain, Rick didn't talk to me. We didn't go over nothing. I was a nervous wreck. But he looked right at me before I went through the curtain, and he said, tonight or today, you're going to be Ricky Steamboat.
Wow.
And I just peed my pants, Dave. I mean, you kidding me?
Awesome.
This is like 9 a.m. in the morning. I done drove 5 hours to Atlanta, and all of a sudden I'm in the ring with NWA champ Ric Flair, and we got out there, Dave, and to show you how classy Ricky is, if you watch that tape now, honestly, if he was a mark, you would have thought I was going to win the NWA World Belt. I mean, he gave me, and we went like 15 minutes on TV, if you can believe it, but he gave me 14 minutes of that match.
That's wild.
And it's funny because you know what's special about our business? Now, some 30-something years later, Dave, wrestling fans still come up to me and they remember that match. And it's funny because they say, man, I thought you was going to win. I tell them that I thought I was too, But see, Rick could have went out there and ate me up for 15 minutes, but he didn't. And then it took off. And then he asked for me like every week on TV. And it was just simply as I knew my job. I knew he was Ric Flair, and I was going to do everything I could to put him over. And just amazing stories. One time, Dave, he gave me his ropes. One time he had 30 ropes, if you can believe this. 30 ropes. He came up to me at TV one time, and he said, George, I'm going to be on Good Morning America next week. But I need Olivia Walker, who was Wrestling 2's wife in Atlanta, who made all of Rick's robes. He said, I need you to run my robes down to Atlanta, and she's going to fine-tune them and fix them, and I'm going to take them to Good Morning America. And so I said, man, that's great. So I met him at the airport. Dave, if you can believe this, I put 30 of Rick's robes in my car. Now, looking back, I wish I'd have stole one of them, but I didn't. So I'm driving to Atlanta with 30 of his robes. Each one of them averaged like 10 grand a piece. And buddy, listen, I looked over at my dashboard and it's all bent in. You know, I'm driving like, 1979 Pinto, if you can remember them.
Oh, yeah.
Them old ugly looking Pintos. So I'm certainly adding up. Okay, I got like $100,000 worth of robes in my back seat, and I'm driving this $300 Pinto. So by the time I got to Atlanta, I said, wait, something ain't right with this. I got more robes in my car. And she fixed them. He went to Good Morning America, and, I didn't get a robe. But I wished I would have. I wish I'd have hung on to them.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I'm going to...
There's so many. Rick, listen, there'll never be another one.
No.
I mean, honestly, there'll never be a world champion. See, wrestlers don't even want to wrestle 365 days, Dave, a year. It's funny, I had lunch with Kane about 6 months ago, and you know what's funny is to go have lunch with Kane, and this is when, he was still doing some appearances as Kane, but he told me, he said, let's just go somewhere where nobody will recognize me. And Dave, I started laughing, because he's like 7 foot tall, and his eyebrows are shaved, and he's bald-headed.
Right.
Yeah, we can try to hide that, but anyway, we were eating lunch, and I was joking. I said, Kane, if I was in charge of wrestling, we'd go back to the days of us wrestling 7 days a week. And he looked over at me with that, scared me dead with that look. He said, George, we don't want to wrestle 7 days a week, and that's kind of how it is. I mean, with the contracts and stuff. But man, I'm just telling you, he paid a lot of bills for me. They helped, when Animal just passed away, Dave, I had just told him a few days earlier, I just thanked him, because I'm serious, and it sounds corny, but all those years, all of my kids are grown now, but all those legends helped me raise my family, Dave, because they drew money, and I was on the card, and I was able to go pay my bills, and I'll never forget that.
What about the Road Warriors? Any great stories of working with the Road Warriors?
Oh, you know what? You'll love this. I knew them when they wasn't even together. I knew Animal in Atlanta when Ole Anderson just saw him and thought, holy cow, what is this? And he came out and cut off blue jeans, and if I'm not mistaken, they just called him the Road Warrior by himself. And they brought Hawk in later, but I'm going to tell you, I've never, years after all of our, let me tell you this real quick. I get carried away. The scariest thing in wrestling, Dave, is standing in the ring and you hear, what was it, Iron Maiden or whatever, Iron Man.
Iron Man, yeah.
And you see Animal and Hawk running to the ring after you. And sometimes Hawk would forget to take his spikes off.
Yeah.
Because, and you know what's funny, Dave, a lot of fans don't know this, but usually their matches went quick. So what I mean by that is Gene Anderson, the old school old-timer, he used to be the signal guy. So in other words, when he walked out behind the curtain, Tommy Young would see him and it was time to go home.
Right.
Okay? So what makes you have a heart attack is when Gene Anderson is standing out in front of the curtain before the Road Warriors get out. So you know this is going to end quick.
Right.
So Hawk would jump in that ring with you and forget to take his spikes off. And you just knew he was going to shoot you in the ropes and, hit that big spike. But years after all of our wild living and all this kind of stuff, me, Ted DiBiase, and the Road Warriors, I was there the night that Animal and Hawk they just changed their life, Dave. They gave their life to the Lord, and for the next 3 years of Hawk's life, I wish I could tell you, Dave, what I saw this man do as far as for children and the homeless people, and nobody will ever talk about that, but everybody knew Hawk, and it was this larger-than-life figure, Animal, too, and they just decided that they wanted to do some good. And I'm going to tell you, I was at the Pontiac Silverdome with Ted DiBiase and Sting and the Road Warriors, 60,000 teenagers in this Pontiac Silverdome doing this huge youth conference. And, man, the reaction of the Road Warrior Animal and them coming out. But you know what I love? There was a period in WCW, Dave, where the top guys could care less if they hurt us or not. They were just clumsy.
Right.
And stupid stuff. They were breaking young guys' noses and just being stupid. I never forget Hulk. He walked in the dressing room one night, and he got in a couple of those guys' face that were hurting us. And I was over grinning, standing beside him. He said, the next one of you, he was telling all the top guys, the next one of you that hurt one of these underneath guys, I'm going to hurt you.
Huh. Wow.
And we were friends for life after that, Dave.
Yeah.
But no, it's so sad because Animal, let me tell you a quick story about this, not to be sad, but just tell you how special Animal is.
Sure.
Every year, my oldest son, George Jr., who's like 35, Animal and Hulk would always wish him happy birthday. In other words, when he was little, he loved the Road Warrior. He had a huge tattoo on his arm years ago of their face paint. I mean, he loved the Road Warriors. Well, I know this sounds goofy and people think I'm making this up, but my son's birthday was the day after Animal died.
Oh, wow.
So that morning, Dave, I was texting Animal just wanted me to remind him to call my son and wish him happy birthday. And Dave, buddy, just to show you how precious life is, in the middle of that text to Animal, I saved it. I still have it on my phone. One of my buddies texted me and said, have you heard about Animal passing away? And, buddy, I just stopped that text and, oh, my goodness. And it was true. You know, he passed away. So just amazing, but it meant so much to him. Every year he'd call my son. But just, man, buddy, I'm going to tell you, Ricky Morton told me a story one time, him and Robert in Baltimore. They love to shoot pool, and they're real good at pool. Well, back in the day, they would, Ricky and Robert would go in a pool hall, and they would just go in and they'd work everybody in there. You know how it is. They'd act like they couldn't shoot pool and then get everybody to play the game, and then Ricky and Robert take all your money.
Right.
Well, Ricky said one time in Baltimore, they were doing it, said him and Robert were making all kind of money, and all of a sudden, the whole bar, the whole pool hall realized what they were doing. And Ricky said it was like something in a movie that, all these, brutes had Ricky and Robert cornered, going, get their money back. And all of a sudden, Ricky said it was like a movie. He said the front door swung open, and it was the Road Warriors.
Oh, man.
And he said, everybody turned around, and Hulk said, is there a problem? Of course, there wasn't no problem,
No.
So, man, I miss them. They just, I do. They just, I'm telling you, just, and we'll move on.
That's all right. Go ahead.
If you go back and watch my old Road Warrior matches with them, Tommy Young was always the referee, the great NWA ref. If you go back, and for some reason, and I thank him to this day, when they hit the ring on us, Tommy Young would always bend over or go over to him and tell him to take it easy on George. So you actually go back and watch some of these matches when they hit the ring, like Hulk will stop in momentum, like in mid-stride.
Yeah.
And Tommy Young's whispering to him, you can kill the other guy, but just take care of George.
That's so great. That's so great. Wow. George, I wanted to ask you, because you started talking about them, and obviously they were such tough guys too, and that made me think of Ming. What about Haku? Any stories about Haku? Did you ever work with Haku?
Oh, listen, it's like Arn Anderson says, if Haku fixes you a hamburger, whether you like what he put on it or not, you eat it.
Right.
But honestly, being around him and working with him, he was probably, now if he hears this, he'll probably kill me, but he took care of the guy he was with more than anybody I've ever seen. But now he looked, and his moves were so vicious, but he really cared about the guy he was in the ring with. And I would trust him. I would trust him with my life. I mean, honestly, he was that good. And see, that's what, and nobody understands that, Dave. The object of our business is not to kill each other.
Right.
There's a lot of guys that learned that yet. But Haku was one of those, I used to talk to, I got to wrestle Lou Thez. Dave, and my first year of wrestling, I was like 18 years old. And Lou Thez was still wrestling. Well, and I know him through the magazines, but I was this cocky, 18-year-old and thought I knew everything. And so I'm booked against Lou Thez. And I was actually mad, if you can believe it, Dave. Like, look at me. What did this old man He got up from the squats, and he looked me right in the face, and he said, "First of all, you're going to shut up." And I said, "Yes, sir." And so the reason I said that is I used to ask the old-timers, how tough was Lou Fez? I mean, was he really? Now, when I worked with him, you could feel him. I mean, he was older, but, man, you knew he could tie you in a knot. But I used to ask Nelson Royal and Ole Anderson, and you know what was funny, Dave? They would all say, "Well, we don't know if he was tough or not. We was always afraid to find out."
Right.
Now, I know Lou Fez was tough, but it's like nobody wanted to try to find out.
Sure.
But
yeah.
now, with me, I mean, you knew. I mean, if you were stupid enough to even make him mad or whatever, but you didn't. If you never met me, you knew you didn't want to mess with him. But just one of the, I always joked with him because, you know, he, down in Florida, he was working at this huge car dealership for a while. He may still be doing it, but I used to joke with him that he probably gets Salesman of the Week every month. You know? I mean, if Mays will sell you a car, what are you going to do? Tell him no?
Right.
Dave?
I'll take two of them.
you probably got every sales record in that dealership.
People are buying two cars. They can't even afford it.
Oh, they're buying 2 or 3 cars. Oh, yeah. Whatever extras you want, man, just put them on there. I'll take them.
How's the school going right now with everything, with COVID and everything?
Oh, buddy, it's going good. You know, God is so good, Dave. I'm going to tell you. You know what's funny about North Carolina? It is the stupidest people in charge. In other words, listen to this, Dave. We work 2.5, if you can believe it. No, what that means is we're not open yet officially. We're 2.5. Well, this 2 weeks ago, the big announcement's coming, and we're thinking that gyms and restaurants and stuff's going to open like everywhere else. But Dave, we go to 2.7. What the heck is 2.7? So,
Oh, no.
my school went from 3 days to 1. I never did close it down completely, and we've just recently opened back up to 2 days a week. And we're hoping that, you know, more things will ever get normal again. But man, last night was my training night, and I had Tessa. You know, Tessa Blanchard. Her and her husband, Miguel, they were in town seeing her mom and Magnum, and she came to my school. And Dave, buddy, we for about 3 hours. I mean, people think I say this because I trained her, but I have never in my life met somebody that works as hard as she does. And Dave, you know as well as I do, wrestling fans think just because your dad was famous that you're going to be famous.
Not the case.
And see, you're exactly right. To me, it's harder when your dad was famous.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember one time, the first interview she ever done, Dave, was with Bill Apter. Me and her sit down with Bill Apter. And his first question was, "How's your dad doing?" Right. And I stopped the interview, Dave. I said, no, listen, this is about Tessa.
Yeah.
And I've just seen her work so hard. And I don't know what her next step is, but you know, it's like a lady yesterday at my school, Dave. She called, this lady, I don't even know her. She calls me. She said, my son wants to come to your school. And she starts asking me all these questions. And I said, man, all you got to do is go Google. Go to the internet and Google my name. She said, honestly, and that will tell you in 10 minutes everything you need to know about me. And she didn't understand what I meant. She was wanting to ask me all these stupid questions. Then I told her this, Dave. I said, when Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat and Tully Blanchard, when they bring their kids to you, for you to train them, you better know what the heck you're doing, Dave.
Absolutely.
And that's probably one of my greatest honors is to have those guys that, you know, trust me. Because you know what I tell people, Dave, these young fans? I said, listen, the ring don't care what your name is. The ring, when you fall on it, it don't care if you're a Flair, it don't care if you're a Blanchard, and Anderson, it doesn't care what your name is, because it hurts anyway.
Right.
So, but man, I worked her hard last night, and we're just going to see, she tells me to calm down, if you can imagine that, Dave, because I see her without the makeup, when the hair ain't done, with the sweat and the tears, and just, in an old ring, and she's got to listen to me. That's the part I see. Right. And so the fans don't see that, and then, when she won that Impact World Heavyweight title from, she beat a man. sudden, I had to shut down the internet in my life because I was fixing to go to somebody's house and punch them. I mean, all of a sudden, all these fans had something stupid to say about Pizza beat the man.
Right.
But Dave, any fan knows that it all had already been done years ago with China anyway.
Sure.
You know it?
Yeah.
But that ain't what made me mad. I thought, listen, it was like when David Flair, Ric Flair's son, when he became U.S. champion in Atlanta. He hadn't been in the business a year, and they gave him the U.S. belt, and everybody hated him. But Dave, what was he supposed to do?
Well, you're right.
You know,
I agree.
You know what I'm saying? What was Tessa? When the company tells you you're fixing to win the belt, there's no person in the world that would say no.
Right, 100%.
And if you do, you're an idiot.
Yeah, I agree.
And
David Arquette, they gave him the world title. What was he going to say?
Yes.
No? Why would he say no?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you know what breaks my heart is David Flair, who I still see, he hates wrestling. He's got a right to. They didn't even give him a chance, Dave. And David now's doing real good. Man, he's got a great job, a big family, and he'll talk to me all day. But if I mention wrestling, man, he's got to get off that phone. But then I don't blame him.
Yeah.
People said he should not have got that U.S. belt. But what was he supposed to do?
I'll tell you.
I mean, seriously.
I'll tell you, George, I just had a conversation with a guy. He's doing a book on Lance Von Erich, and it's to tell his story. And it's funny because I always knew him as the fake Von Erich, right? And I love the Von Erich.
Right.
But then I thought about it, not even knowing or asking. I'm like, what is the likelihood? It's not this guy's idea. He didn't say, hey, I want to be a fake Von Erich. I want to be an imposter Von Erich. He got offered a job, and he took it, which is what you do in life.
Exactly right.
You take a job.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And Dave, you are so inagreeable with that because what these people don't realize now, let's just take Lance Von Erich. That probably was a decision whether he lost his house or not.
Right.
I mean, seriously, because nobody understands that. People say, well, see, in my day, it was acceptable because, George, I would wrestle here, Dave, and then I would go to Memphis maybe and put a mask on. And then they'd just come up with a name.
Right.
And so what am I going to do? Say no? A lot of times, it's like Terry Taylor when they told him you're going to be the Red Rooster.
Right.
I laugh. I love that gimmick they gave him. Everybody hates Terry Taylor for being a Red Rooster. But Terry tells me he makes more money in 3 months as the Red Rooster than he's ever made. You know?
Yeah, right. Cock-a-doodle-doo. Let's do it.
Yes. But you're exactly right, buddy. What are these guys going to, what's Lance Von Erich going to do? Say no?
Right.
I don't want to be a Von Erich? Give it to somebody else? Heck no. But I was laughing because when Tessa won there were actually guys that had won a belt in wrestling dogging her for winning the belt. And a couple of them, I called them out on it, Dave, because I said, oh, well, let me get this right. So y'all really won the belt, right?
Right.
I mean, so y'all really won that belt. It wasn't a work when y'all won it. And it's just amazing that I always joke with people about pro wrestling that let me tell you a quick story, Dave. I'm going to share this with you before.
Go ahead.
I got to know Black Jack Mulligan before he died, and we become real close, and I'd worked with him some, but, man, we got real close towards those last few months. And, he told me a funny story. He said in the 60s, when wrestling first took off, Dave, I mean, I'm talking color television, Gorgeous George, and they were selling out everywhere because it was new. Well, the Mafia up in New York heard about all this money down here. So the Mafia came down and got involved in wrestling. Now, Dave, listen, after 5 days, they threw their hands up and went back to New York. Seriously, they said them guys are nuts.
Right.
So if the Mafia don't want nothing to do with us, but I laugh sometimes now because, all you can do with wrestling, my first week in the business, an old-timer told me, Dave, said, all you can do is make wrestling better than when you found it.
Right.
And that's the secret. Dave, everybody asks me, what's important, what ain't important? And I get tickled because young wrestlers now, you see posts on Facebook about they get mad at a promoter because a promoter didn't return their call, Dave. Mm-hmm. And that's the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life. Nobody owes you nothing in pro wrestling. They don't. And if you're sitting around waiting for a a promoter to call you back. That probably ain't going to happen.
Nope.
And I think that's what's made me, I think that's why I survived this COVID, is because once you've been in wrestling, Dave, you survive anything.
Right.
I survived the Ultimate Warrior. What the heck's COVID going to give me?
You talk about giving back. I'm going to ask you about one other guy, and then I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about, anything you want to promote. Giving back. A guy that I think of a lot with that was Terry Funk. I felt like Terry just constantly gave up his body years and years. What about Terry? We never talked about Terry. Did you get to work a lot with Terry? Any stuff with Terry?
Oh, listen, he's in the league. I always say there was Terry Funk, and then there was us.
Right.
There's a picture, Dave, I just put on my Facebook. Tessa Blanchard came to my school last night, and she's wearing a pair of Kenny Lamas, which I always call them Terry Funk boots. Those cowboy tennis shoes he always wore. Now, I've got several pair of them. To me, if I was training you, Dave, the greatest respect I can give you is when I give you a pair of them boots. To me, it's everything that Terry Funk stood for. He fought for the underneath guys. He fought for the top guys. He gave his body to all of this. So Tessa's got a pair of them on in that picture with me. So some guy on Facebook said, "Oh, I love your boots," which I thought was comical, Dave. You got Tessa Blanchard and the guy's looking at her boots, okay? Right. But anyway, so I was able to share with this guy that, I wasn't bragging, but I said, I gave them to her years ago because to me, I believe in you if I'm going to do that. That's how much Terry Funk means to me. And I'm going to tell you, I got a picture, Dave. I wish I could send it to you. Last year he came through here with Big Time Wrestling and did some appearances. He actually got in the ring a few times. Huh. But there's a picture, Dave, that I just recently got, and I'll talk about it here in a little bit. I got my own bottled water, if you can believe it.
Wow.
And so I'm big time, buddy. So there's a picture. I wanted to give Terry Funk one of my bottles of water because first he'd think I was nuts. But he loves it to see anybody come up with an idea to try to make $1.
Sure. Yeah.
And so there's a picture. The guy just happened to snap that I'm in the dressing room. Terry Funk's lacing his boots up. And here it is. It looks like I'm trying to sell him a bottle of water. And he's got this look like, you're probably the goofiest guy I've ever met in my life. But he took the bottle of water, so I'm very happy about that. But he's in a league by himself. And he was one. No matter who he worked with, he gave them probably 75% of the match, Dave.
One of the best promos of all time, too. Some of his promos.
Oh, unbelievable.
Yeah. I don't know if some of them would air, but I saw one the other day where it was with that feud with Ric Flair in '89, and he's talking about this jackass his dad had, and they had to put it down, and Terry Funk's on his knees crying, and he's saying, we got to put Ric Flair down. I'm like, this is just tremendous. I don't know if it would air today, but it's tremendous. I love that.
No, I know. In WCW, when they had him go in that bar, and he walked behind that horse, and the horse kicked him. And he cussed the horse out and walked off the set. He said, I should have known better. But my last Terry Funk story, you'll love this, Dave. He did the Roadhouse movie with Patrick Swayze. I love that movie. Well, one time in WCW, Nick Terry Funk, when he was working, this was after the movie, of course, we're sitting in a dressing room. And he's on his phone. When we're just randomly talking, it was like 3 hours before the show. Well, I look down and his phone goes off. And it's Patrick Swayze. Patrick Swayze's calling him, so I'm marking out.
Wow.
And Terry Funk ain't even answering. And I'm trying to be respectful, but I'm not ready to grab his phone.
Yeah, right.
And so he goes to voicemail. And I said, when it was done, I said, Terry, it ain't none of my business, but was that the Patrick Swayze? And Terry said, oh, yeah, he's always calling me. And I said, well, why didn't you answer it? He said, well, I'm tired. He said, he'd want to go get a beer later, and I don't want to. And I said, and he just got up and walked off. I'm sitting there, Dave, with my mouth open, thinking, let's go, I'll buy you supper, But it was just so cool that it just randomly rang, and I looked down, and
George, you're such a passionate guy. I love it. What do you want to promote today? What do you got going on? I know you got your books.
Oh, but I got a little thing. Of course, my book. Yeah. I'm so proud. It's been out probably 9 or 10 years. Dad, you don't work, you wrestle. That's my life story. My good friend Mark James up in Tennessee, he did Bill Dundee's and Dutch Mantel's book, and such a great guy. And Dave, when you give somebody your whole life story, there's a lot of trust. And the one thing that I'm so proud of is I didn't want Mark James to change any of the words. I wanted it to be like me and you're talking, Dave.
Right.
And that's been such a great compliment over the years. People that have bought it, they come back and they tell me that, man, when I read it, I felt like we were just sitting around talking. So that, of course, they can go to my website, georgesouth.com. And, man, I'm so proud of that book. This coming Saturday, me and Ricky Steamboat are going to be at one of these toy and comic book conventions. And, man, I love them. It's just close to home here. And, man, I just love going to meet and just still meeting fans. And so I have my book there. Of course, I got my own bottled water.
Yes.
Hey, let's do a quick story. When I come up with this idea, I got twin daughters that are like 22 years old, and they don't care that I'm a pro wrestler. So they'll call me an idiot in a minute. Let me tell you, Dave. So I come up with this idea. I said, I'm going to get my own water that people can drink. And I say that, Dave, because people actually ask me, can they drink it when they buy it? I said, well, yeah, you can, But anyway, so I come up with this idea. Well, a guy on the internet, Dave, I don't even know these people. He comes and says, this is the stupidest idea that George South has ever come up with. And Dave, he should have never said that. Because that put me on a mission.
Right.
And I tell you, you know what I did? I kept his name. And Dave, when I sold my 1,000th bottle of water, I dedicated it to that idiot. I got right over here. And I said, this is dedicated to this one guy. And you know what? My daughters hate that guy because they even wrote in and said, listen, if you would have just shut up, my dad would have just forgot about this and went on to something else. But he just had to say, it was a stupid idea.
Sometimes
anyway,
fight can be a hell of a motivator, huh?
I'm telling you. That guy, I would have never done it. Honestly, I would have come up with some other goofy idea. But, man, when he said it was stupid, I said, I'll show you. And you know what's funny? Listen to this, Dave. I started it. Now, Rock and Roll Express have their own water. Ricky and Robert, Animal, bless his soul, he had his own water.
Wow.
Teddy Long has his own water now. So, it's funny. When we're at these conventions together, Dave, you come in, you walk down one aisle, and it looks like a concession stand.
Right, I bet.
I mean, you got all these tough wrestlers selling their water.
Sure.
But Dave, I got my first bottle real quick. You'll love this. Me and Ricky Steamboat was going to be at a comic convention. And I love Ricky Steamboat. He's just, man, he's perfect to me. But anyway, I wanted to show him my water. So I sit behind my back, and I go up to Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. And I said, Ricky, I got to show you something. I said, now, if you break my heart, and if you tell me this is stupid, I'll never sell another one. And, I mean, I'm being stupid. So, anyway, I showed it to him, and Dave, he marked out like crazy.
That's awesome.
And you know what he told me? He said, George, wait a minute now. He said, I'm not marking out because of your own water. He said, I'm marking out because you're actually selling it here beside the concession stand of the Civic Center that's selling their own water.
Right. That's right.
And I never got caught,
That's awesome.
So anyway, yeah, my water, my book. I just came out, went down and done the NWA. I don't know if you got a chance to see it a couple months ago, but well before COVID, I went down and did the NWA tapings.
Yeah, it was
and man, you talking about going back in time. Mm-hmm. That was as close to a center stage taping. But you know the one thing I didn't like, Dave?
Yeah.
I did not know during the match. This is why I hate wrestling fans nowadays. While me and Colby Corino was wrestling, fans could sit home on their computers and comment on the match.
Right.
Now listen, when one of my students showed me that, I mean, I was like, I was like I got a smartphone and didn't know how to use it. My issue is you can't let people comment and not let me rebuttal. You know what I mean? So, yeah, you talk about my match, but you got to put me on a laptop and let me talk about you talking about my match.
Right. That's
But you know, here's how goofy I am. The guy that owns NWA, the Smashing Pumpkins guy.
Oh, yeah. Billy Corgan.
Yeah, Billy Corgan.
Yep.
He is, you don't believe this, Dave. He's such. I never met the guy. I never listened to Smashing Pumpkins. I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
So I'm there at TV, and this guy comes up to me, and he starts talking about my matches with Ric Flair. And honestly, Dave, I'm not lying. I didn't know who it was. I mean, I thought it was like just this fan or a production guy that loves me. So we're just sitting here putting Rick over and the Midnight Rock and Roll feud, and Ricky Morton comes over and pulls me to the side. He said, "You don't know who that is, do you?" I said, "Man, I don't know. I just know he loves me and Ric Flair." And Ricky said, "That's like the guy." I said, "Oh my gosh." Oh my gosh. And I turned around at Billy Corgan, he had a big old smile on his face. You know? But I didn't even know. And man, I hope they get back in production.
Yeah, me too. Good product.
Because I loved it.
Yeah.
You know what I loved about that day? Everybody's asked me since then, what did you like about the NWA that you did, that WWE and WCW and others could probably learn from? You know, the minute I arrived in NWA, Dave, nobody told me what to say on my interview. Nobody told me what to do in my match. And to me, forget money. I know we got to make money. But to me, that's still the greatest compliment in the world, that they trusted me enough. So when I went out there, so you got to feel it, Dave. When I do an interview, you know what I'm saying? I got to feel what I'm doing. And so anyway, all of that was just done as it came to me. And I'd go back in a heartbeat. I loved every minute of it.
Yeah, there's something very authentic, very real about NWA. Right. It comes off very, it's just not generic or anything. I don't know. It's like you can tell everybody has these promos that are not too far. Like Tim Storm. He comes off like that's who he is. You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
And see, that's why I don't care what the fans say now. You know what Ole Anderson used to call it, Dave? He had such a good illustration. He said that in our day, and I know people get tired of me saying in our day, but in our day, we took a blank canvas, Dave, and we painted. Seriously, that's what we did. Every wrestler painted a different picture. Nowadays, Ole used to say it's a canvas with paint by numbers. The canvas has numbers on it telling you where to paint. And I don't know. I'm so thankful I broke in when I did and got the track. See, we didn't even fly anywhere, Dave. You know, I think I've shared this with you. I learned so much in the back seat of Wahoo McDaniel's car with my mouth shut. Because him and Ronnie Garvin or him and Ivan, they would talk over finish. I mean, that's where you learned angles and stuff. But you didn't open your mouth. You know, you just listened. And oh gosh, what I miss. With that. But and I know I'm talking to you dead, Dave, but
that's all right.
But I'm gonna circle this back around to Dusty. And one of my and at the time I didn't realize what I was doing, but now that I look back, for some reason, when I started working for Dusty and he was booking me every week, every Monday morning, Dave, at 8 a.m. I would call his office and just say thank you. I mean, I'm telling you, whether it was one booking or 7 bookings, the Great American Bash, whatever, I would call him Monday morning. Every Monday morning I would say thank you, Dusty, for what you did for me this weekend or last week. And I think he got tired of it. He got tired of me because after a while, the secretary would answer. And Dave, she would say, "George, Dusty knows that you appreciate him." She wouldn't even put my calls through.
That's funny.
So, but now that Dusty's gone, I'm so thankful that I took. You know, Dave, how much it means to me that I took a few moments just to tell Dusty thank you.
Oh, right, absolutely.
And that now that they're gone. But I tell you, this sums up Dusty in my life. My oldest son, his first time he took a booking in Philadelphia, George Jr. They flew him up there. He thought he was Ric Flair. Well, him and Dusty's on the same plane. For some reason, he knew Dusty. Dusty knew my son. Well, the plane lands Now, Dusty's the one that tells me this after it happened. The plane lands, and my son has never had to go get in a motel or a taxi. He's never had to do any of that. This is his first time on the road. He sees Dusty in the airport, and my son, he was like 20 at the time. He walked up to Dusty and said, "Mr. Rhodes, where are you staying at tonight?" And Dusty said, "Hey, kid, you ain't sleeping with me." But my son knew that Dusty had always took care of his dad, and he just natural instinct was Dusty's gonna take care of me too.
Right.
And I always laughed. Dusty said, "Man, your kid thought he was gonna sleep on my floor." So, man, everybody says, "What would you go back and change?" Dave, I wish I would have, and I know it sounds crazy, I wish I'd have slowed down. And I really tried to enjoy, every moment of what happened in my career. But, I'm still 41 years, Dave. I've been able to be a pro wrestler, and I still love it. I still love it. It sounds corny, but, man, I still love the going sitting behind an old gimmick table with popcorn smell in the air. And, Lord, this was some of everything else you talked about, Dave. They just did an interview with Kid Rock.
Yep.
On like 2020 or one of the news things, and they're going around his home. And the lady asked him, said, "I bet when you're up on stage, you're real nervous, you're anxious, and you're worried, and you just want to get off stage." And he stopped her, and he said, "Oh no, you got it backwards." He said, "When I'm in the real world, that's when I have, nerves racking, and that's when pressure's on me." So what he meant by that was, man, when he's on stage, he's at home, Dave.
Yeah.
And that's how me and several wrestlers are. When we're in the ring, man, it's just, man, everything's good. Everything's good.
George.
And I think that's what I'll do till, I told everybody, when George dies, there ain't going to be no tributes. Hey, listen, I tell people, if you want to love George, love me now. hey, send me flowers now. Don't wait till I'm dead, okay?
George, I don't think we can end this on a better note. Well said. Thank you so much for your time. I'm glad we could promote you. You have all the best stories in the world. Your passion comes through, and I absolutely love it. Thank you so much for being on the show, man.
Oh, Dave, thank you so much, buddy. It's my pleasure, my honor, and I did let you talk a little bit this time.
Yes,
okay?
all right, George. I was ready.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you for everything and letting me plug my stuff and just talking about, that it really was a very, very special time. I told my class last night, Dave, as we close, is for years wrestling fans wanted to find out what was behind the curtain. And now that they found out, they realized that they were better off before they found out what was behind the curtain.
1,000%.
Ain't that something? Mm-hmm. I tell people, I got a buddy that loves magicians.
Yeah.
Magic. And he's been trying for 3 years to tell me how they do their tricks, and I keep hanging up on him.
Yeah, right.
I said, "You goofball. I don't want to know how y'all pull a rabbit out of your hat."
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
Because once you find out what happens, it's almost like you have to find different reasons to love it still.
Yes.
Right, because I remember, during the empty matches on Raw when it had no fans whatsoever, and there's no storyline to it. It's not like you're building up to an empty arena match like Funk and Lawler. It's just, empty. And I thought to myself, I could watch UFC, and I'd watch that, and I'd be more interested because I'm really invested in the outcome. Whereas now,
that's right.
Now I'm invested in more of the show. Whereas a kid,
that's right,
and I didn't know better. Well, I wanted to see Ricky Steamboat beat that no good Ric Flair. That was everything to me back then. But
amen.
Yeah.
Buddy, don't ever change that. Dave, I tell people, see, when I first started, I was trying to figure out this business, and I remember Ole Anderson told me, he said, "Go home and start watching old cowboy and Indian movies, old westerns." I said, "What are you talking about? I want to be the greatest wrestler in the world. I don't want to go watch movies." He said, "Go home, watch an old western movie." And I'm going to tell you, if you do that now, that is the whole concept of our wrestling. You got the bad guy and you got the good guy, Dave, and the good guy always wins.
Absolutely.
That's all wrestling is.
Absolutely.
I'm telling you, I tell these fans, stop trying to figure out and just eat your popcorn.
Right. Just enjoy the show. And if you don't like it, watch something else. Watch something else if you don't like it. Either enjoy it, and
exactly.
listen, there's a lot of shows out there now. There's more content than ever, which I don't think is the best thing because I think there's oversaturation. But when I do watch stuff, there's a lot of times I'm not going to enjoy everything as a fan. But that doesn't mean I hate the whole show. I find things that I enjoy. And,
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, see, it's like Ric Flair, Dave, and then I'll let you go. It's like I tell people all the time, everybody's saying Ric's old and he needs to retire, and I get so mad because, see, Ric is my last connection to the way wrestling used to be. He really is. And he still can come out and do a promo better than 95% of the people in wrestling. And Dave, I tell people, that's because it's in his heart. I can teach you a few wrestling moves, but if it ain't in your heart, seriously, see, what Ric has, you can't teach. And he just loves pro wrestling. But, I tell fans, if you got to go to college and get a diploma before you can understand wrestling, somebody's got it wrong.
Damn right.
Seriously, I just want to sit there, buy some overpriced gimmicks
Yes.
and watch the good guy beat the bad guy. That's all I want.
Keep
And
it
then go
simple.
home.
Like Bobby Heenan used to say, keep it simple for the humanoid.
Amen. Well, Dave, thank you, buddy. Man, I'll talk to you for another 2 hours if you don't let me go.
It's all right, George. We'll get you back on. Have a great day, man. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you, my friend.
Bye, George.
Bye-bye.
All right, so that wraps us up for this week. Thank you again for listening to the Working Fans Podcast. So as always, you can find us on Twitter at FansWorking. Our Facebook page is Working Fans Wrestling Pod. We have email where you can reach out to us and let us know what you think also. That's workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram, workingfanswrestling_pod. And then as always, please continue to listen to us on Anchor.fm, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, all your major platforms. If you're following us on Apple Podcasts, which we are also on now, and YouTube, please make sure you subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. It helps us bring you these podcasts where we get to talk to you and talk with you every week.